When we think about dementia, our minds often jump straight to the end of the story. That heartbreaking moment when someone can't remember a loved one's name. But what science is telling us is that's not the beginning at all. It's actually the final chapter of a long, silent biological journey that started deep inside the brain decades earlier. So today, we're going to trace that journey right from its very first spark.
So, let's start with a question. What if dementia isn't some sudden event, but it's more like a slow-burning fire? A fire that just smolders quietly, deep inside the brain, for 10, 20, sometimes even 30 years before we see a single wisp of smoke, a single noticeable symptom. That's the core idea we're going to unpack right now.
Because that's exactly what the research shows. Dementia isn't a single moment in time. It's a progressive cascade of biological changes, a domino effect. And understanding this journey is absolutely the key to detecting it earlier, and hopefully, one day, stopping it completely in its tracks. So let's follow the evidence and see how this fire really gets going.
All right, so our journey begins with the initial trigger, the very first spark in this whole process. It's a tiny protein fragment that, believe it or not, everyone has. But in some of us, it starts to cause some really big problems. We're talking about something called amyloid beta.
So, what on earth is amyloid beta, or A-beta for short? Well, it's a protein fragment that's constantly being made and cleared away in a healthy brain. It's all part of the brain's normal daily housekeeping. The big problem in Alzheimer's disease is that this cleanup system just breaks down. Either the brain starts making too much of it, or it's not clearing enough of it away, and it just starts to build up.
And when it builds up, it doesn't just sit there quietly. Oh no, it kicks off a whole chain reaction. First, these individual protein fragments start clumping together into these sticky messes called amyloid plaques. These plaques then start messing with the synapses, those critical communication points between our brain cells, and they create this toxic environment that just sets the stage for the next, much worse phase of damage. But here's an absolutely crucial point about amyloid. While it's the spark that gets this whole thing started, it is not the raging fire itself. Just having amyloid buildup doesn't directly cause the severe memory loss we all associate with dementia. Instead, its main job is to ignite another, far more destructive process. So if amyloid is the spark, this next phase is what really fans the flames. This is where a second protein, called tau, enters the story. And tau is what really gets the fire going.
In a healthy brain, tau is one of the good guys. Its job is to stabilize the internal skeleton of our neurons. Think of it like railroad ties holding the tracks together. And these tracks are absolutely essential for shipping nutrients and other vital cargo up and down the cell. But in a diseased brain, tau goes completely rogue. It starts to misfold, it breaks off from the tracks, and then it clumps together inside the neuron, forming these things called neurofibrillary tangles. The whole transport system just collapses, and the neuron essentially begins to starve and die from the inside out. And here is a critical distinction you have to remember. While amyloid starts the problem decades earlier, it's the spread of this toxic tau that tracks almost perfectly with the symptoms a person is actually experiencing. Basically, wherever this toxic tau spreads, cognitive decline is sure to follow. It's the real driver of the disease that we can see, which is why figuring out how to target tau is such a huge focus for new therapies right now. Okay, so with the brain's transportation system down and neurons starting to die off, we get to the stage where the damage actually becomes physically visible. This is where the brain's very architecture begins to crumble. We call this process neurodegeneration.
Neurodegeneration is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The progressive, physical loss of neurons and all their connections. And this leads to measurable brain shrinkage, or what doctors call atrophy. And this is the point where this long, silent, biological journey finally breaks through into the clinical world. The process is no longer silent at all.
And the fascinating thing is, the location of all this brain cell death maps directly to the symptoms. When the hippocampus, the memory center, starts to shrink, forgetfulness kicks in. When the frontal lobes get hit, things like decision-making and even personality can change. This isn't random. It's a systematic dismantling of the brain's architecture, region by region.
But wait, there's one more key player we have to talk about. It's kind of like a hidden accelerator that pours gasoline on the fire that was started by amyloid and fanned by tau. And that accelerator? It's chronic inflammation.
So the brain has its own special immune cells. They're called microglia. You could think of them as the brain's security guards and cleanup crew. Their job is to clear out waste and fight off any invaders.
But when they are constantly surrounded by amyloid plaques and tau tangles, they get overactivated. They go into panic mode and start pumping out all these inflammatory chemicals that cause collateral damage to perfectly healthy neurons. And here's the really cruel twist. This inflammation actually makes it harder for them to clear out the amyloid, which just creates this vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of damage.
So we've got these 4 really complex things going on: amyloid, tau, neurodegeneration, and inflammation. To really see how they all work together to bring down the brain, it actually helps to use an analogy. Let's imagine the brain as a big, bustling city.
Okay, this really gives us the whole picture. The amyloid is like garbage just piling up on the city streets. It's the first problem, and it creates a toxic environment. This then causes the city's entire transportation network to collapse. That's our tau. As a direct result, buildings start to crumble and roads literally disappear. That's the neurodegeneration. And all the while, the city's firefighters, our immune system, are so overwhelmed they actually start causing accidental damage while trying to fight the fires, and that's the chronic inflammation. The whole city system just starts to fail.
For decades, that's pretty much where the story ended, with the city in ruins. But right now, we are entering a brand new era of real, genuine hope, and it's all built on understanding this exact biology. Science is finally learning how to step in and intervene.
This has led to the first ever treatments that can actually change the underlying biology of Alzheimer's. There are new anti-amyloid drugs that have been shown to remove those initial garbage piles from the brain. And by doing that, they slow down the disease's progression in its early stages by roughly 25 to 35%. Now look, it is not a cure, but it is the first time we have ever been able to slow the fire down. That's huge.
And maybe even more revolutionary is how we can detect the problem in the first place. For years, you needed these incredibly expensive, hard-to-get PET scans to see amyloid in the brain. But now, we're moving to an era where we can detect the key proteins, both amyloid and tau, with highly accurate blood tests. This is a complete game changer, making it possible to spot this biological journey way earlier and so much more easily.
And the future looks even brighter. Scientists are now working on therapies that go after tau directly. Remember, that's the protein that's more closely linked to symptoms. And get this, AI is being trained to spot the earliest, tiniest signs of brain changes in MRI scans, and even in our patterns of speech. It promises detection before this biological journey gets too far down the road.
So, let's quickly recap the biological journey we've just been on. Number 1, it all starts with the spark, amyloid, which builds up silently for decades. 2, this ignites the spread of tau, which is what really drives the symptoms we see. 3, the result is neurodegeneration, the final physical loss of brain tissue. And 4, all along the way, chronic inflammation acts as a powerful accelerator, making every single stage worse.
Which leaves us with a final, really hopeful question. For the first time ever, science can actually see the faint glow of that spark long before the fire begins to rage. Now that we can detect this journey in its earliest, most silent phase, the ultimate goal isn't just to slow the fire anymore, but to one day have the tools to extinguish it completely, before it even has a chance to start.